Hi, welcome to my channel. In the first video of this series about my work Hydra, I described the structure of the piece and explained part of the very unique method that I'm using to write it, called Wave Constellation, which was created by my late friend Haladar Das, to whom the work is dedicated. In this video I'll cover the second part of the method, which deals with the harmonic side of the composition process, and I'll show you a fragment of the piece. But before I continue, please don't forget to subscribe, and if you like the content of this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with others so that educational resources like this are available to more people. If you watched my first video about Hydra, you may have noticed that I now pronounce my friend's name differently. Another friend explained to me that the last vowel should not be pronounced. Haladar never corrected me, but as my friend said, he may have gotten tired of correcting people on how to pronounce his name, just like I do the same with my last name, by the way. Also, another friend asked me what was the benefit of using Haladar's method. The answer is none at all. It had benefits for him, as I explained in my previous video, but he could have gotten the same result in a dozen different ways. He came up with this particular algorithm, and seeing that it worked, he continued to use it. I'm only using it for Hydra because the piece is dedicated to him, and for no other reason. In a sense, it's a way of letting the piece have something of him, that it has a connection to him. My goal with these videos is purely documentary as well as musicological. I think it's interesting to discover the inner workings of an artist's mind, and I hope others find it interesting too. Also, this could inspire other composers to create their own methods. I'm not trying to convince anyone to use Haladar's method, or to prove that it is the best method out there for composing or anything like that. One thing that I forgot to mention about the first part of the method is that the matrix is not randomly traversed. The composer has to set an order. It's kind of like a little game. Let me show you. First, the composer must choose the order of the columns. This is completely arbitrary and there are no particular rules. Once this is done, the order of the terms must be established in each column. One way that Haladar did this was by starting with the lowest term. If there was more than one occurrence of the same number, he chose the one with the lowest number to the right or left, depending on which half of the matrix the column was located. If those numbers were also identical, he looked at the numbers in the next column. For example, in column 3, we start with the terms whose value is 2. The first would be the 2 in row 4, because the number to the right is 5. The next would be the one in row 10, since it's followed by a 7. And then the one in row 12, because the next column has a 9. In rows 9 and 11, we have two terms with value 3, and both are followed by the sequence 8, 4, 10, 3. But then, the first is followed by a 7 in column 8, while the second is followed by a 9, so the 3 in row 9 goes first. Haladar indicated in one of the documents that I have that this procedure could be done in other ways. Instead of starting with the lowest term, we could start with the highest, and when two terms have the same value, we could look for the one that is followed by the highest number instead of the lowest. There are different permutations of these options, as well as other ways to do this, that you can certainly imagine. The only condition here is that once a rule is chosen, the composer has to strictly adhere to it. Now I have to explain the second part of the method, which is involved with the harmonic content of the piece. The first thing the composer has to do here is to write a 12-note chord, not necessarily a chord with 12 different notes, just 12 notes. Haladar called this a tower. I have no idea how he wrote the towers in the various documents that I have. Did he copy them from works by other composers, or did he just write them arbitrarily? I don't know. Here's the tower of Parapadma 1. You can see that it's labeled Tower 4, and is indeed a 12-note chord with no repetition of pitches. The next step is to write down the chord intervals from bottom to top according to the number of semitones, and then, to simplify the following operations, all the intervals larger than the tritone must be changed by their complement. The method doesn't take care of the precise octave of the notes in any of its steps, so for example, it's the same if we go up a major seventh than if we go down a semitone. This explains the minus signs in the sequence. Next, we write the inversion of the interval sequence. That is, we multiply everything by -1. and then we extract a series of subgroups from the sequence and its inversion. In musical set theory, this is known as segmentation. For each sequence, we obtain 6 segments, each of them partly coinciding with other segments. This is done so that there is a coincidence of interval content between the segments, thus ensuring the harmonic unity of the piece. Haladar didn't want to write 12-tone music. He was looking for a sound with a more limited number of pitches per unit of time, and decided that the number should be 6. That's why all segments have 5 numbers, because 5 intervals would produce 6 pitches. Finally, the sequence of numbers in each segment is applied to each note in the tower, which Haladar called stars, thus producing the constellations. A precise order must also be established to do this, but Haladar had no rules for it. By the way, you may have already noticed that Haladar was fascinated by astronomy. Indeed, he was. The constellations can be thought of as pitch-class sets, but Haladar never viewed them this way. Also, they have to be used in a particular order, so in a sense what he created was a kind of 12-tone system in which each element is not a single pitch, but a collection of them. If the row in the 12-tone technique is a one-dimensional array, Haladar's constellations correspond to a two-dimensional one. You may be tempted to think that this process produces 12 different pitch-class sets, but this is not the case. Only 6 sets are produced, as you can see here, but the transposition is not identical between the repetitions, so in the end, there's still harmonic variety throughout the piece. As I said before, the constellations are used in a particular order. Each one is assigned to a plane, which is how Haladar named the rows in the matrix. The stars of each constellation must be numbered, and the numbers must be distributed more or less evenly in the rhythm that corresponds to each term of the matrix, according to the plane in which they are found. For example, let's say this rhythm corresponds to the term in row 4, column 8, which in the modified matrix is a 7 to 8. The constellation in that row, that plane, is this, but instead of writing notes at this point in the process, we assign a number to each of them. Next, we distribute the notes as evenly as possible in the rhythm. There's no particular rule here. It's a very free and intuitive process, but as you may notice, it lacks musical thought. It's about simply distributing the numbers visually, without thinking about the musical result. This is the way Haladar did this, and he had a reason for it. I should point out that he was a very devout man. He believed that Krishna manifested through these processes, so by not thinking about the musical output of the method, he was letting Krishna make the decisions in this regard. Once he transcribed the notes to the computer, he would discover Krishna's musical message, and that discovery would be a kind of revelation for him. So now you know how the method works. It's a bit more complicated than just writing whatever comes to mind, but at the same time, I have to say it's also fun to use. However, I must point out that I'm not applying the method exactly as Haladar did. I've made some small adjustments here and there, not only because I'm not interested in the type of result he was looking for, but also because this work has to be mine. It has to have something of me. If I apply the method as he did, the piece would sound as if it had been written by him and not me, and for that there are already several audios on his SoundCloud channel. Here's a brief summary of the changes to my application of the method. First, I've not performed the second hug on the matrix. In other words, I've not transformed all the terms into ratios. I don't want to write music that uses nested tuplets. I don't like them, and since Haladar mentioned in the document that I have that this operation is optional, I've simply not applied it. Second, I have multiple rhythm charts, one for each movement, and the charts have several columns, not just 2. Also, I didn't invent all the rhythms myself. Instead, I've taken many of them from 6 pieces by different composers. On the one hand, it's a kind of reference to Haladar's desire to have a piece written by various composers. On the other hand, it reinforces the meaning of the title, Hydra, a creature with several heads. Third, the sequence of numbers used to produce the rhythms is not only obtained horizontally, but also vertically, diagonally, clockwise, and counterclockwise. This way, I make sure I have plenty of options to choose the rhythms that seem best suited to each particular section of the piece. Fourth, I'm not deciding the rhythms of the entire piece before writing the music. Instead, I'm doing it between 1 and 4 at a time. I prefer to listen to the rhythms in my mind and choose the ones that I like, rather than not thinking about them and discovering how they sound when I transcribe them to Dorico. Also, this gives me the opportunity to find ways to make rhythmic connections between different sections of the piece, which may not have been what Haladar wanted in his music, but is certainly what I'm looking for in mine. Fifth, I have multiple towers, not just one, and instead of segmenting them into only 6-note constellations, each tower is segmented into 4 5-note, 4 6-note, and 4 7-note constellations. I have specially designed these towers to produce specific combinations of pitch class sets, rather than simply stacking notes and letting chance produce any denote combinations. Finally, I'm not distributing the notes visually on the score without hearing them. On the contrary, I let my inner ear work with the notes of each constellation to find ways to apply the rhythms to them so that the result sounds logical and coherent from a musical point of view. That's all for now. In my next video, I'll show you a spreadsheet that I created to automate part of the process and explain how it works. Now, as promised, I'll play for you a sample of the first movement, called Zeta. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Have a good weekend. Ciao.